Well, hello there. Welcome to the Parenting Show. I'm Jennifer Anderson. We have a great show for you today. I think we have a great show for you every day, but I love this topic. It's overcoming power struggles with your children. Here to help us with the topic, get into it, delve into the situation is my co-host, parenting expert, Alyson Schafer.
My gut reaction was to say, no, I don't want to talk about it.
That's right.
We're just going to role play it.
We're going to talk about food issues instead.
Yeah. I mean, this is the issue that brings people into my private practice. This is the number one thing. This is the thing that is at the heart of why people can't get along. It's at the heart of why husbands and wives can't get along, why employees and employers can't get along, and it certainly becomes even more complex when it comes to our relationships with our kids. That we cannot distribute power equitably, and we fight over power issues. Of course, it doesn't look like that, or that language sounds a little weird to parents, but all they know is that they've got a kid who's talking back, lippy, won't get ready, doesn't listen to what I say, all those kinds of things, and they're all describing the same phenomena of being in a power struggle with your parent.
Right.
But as a parent, we feel we should have more power, because after all, aren't we the parents? Didn't I, work hard to pay the mortgage on this house, and I had you, and you owe me because I'm the adult, and we get a lot of stories around that make us feel that our kids should somehow submit to us. And so if we just think about that word submit to us means that the architecture of the relationship is one where somebody is a slave and somebody is a tyrant. That we're living in one up, one down, unequal relationships.
Right.
So where one person is the puppet and the other person is the puppet master. And when you get that set up in your family, sometimes it's always the parent dominating, but more likely in modern day times, kids don't tolerate feeling subservient. They are unwilling to be told what to do. They don't like being micromanaged. And so when they feel like an underling, when they feel like a puppet, when they feel like a peon and feel powerless in the family, they'll try to get their power back. And then it flips like a teeter-totter.
Right.
And now you've got a kid who says, make me, I won't do it. If they're acting out. Or we might just get kids whose defiance comes in the form of refusal. So they won't eat, they won't potty train, they won't go to bed, they dawdle, they don't listen. All the refusal type things is passive form of a power struggle.
So it doesn't mean necessarily that a child is defiant. It just means overall they aren't listening. Or they aren't paying attention, or, it doesn't have to be a personality trait.
No, absolutely.
It can just be...
Now, I would say that
they're not listening. Yeah,
there are people that... There are people who get their power, feel powerful when they're being contrarian. And that's something that we could work on. But for people to say, I raised a kid and they're really powerful, think about that. If it's power used constructively, then that is the root word of empowerment. That is what self-esteem is all about. That is what leadership is all about. So I love a powerful kid. I don't want to take the power away from children. What I want to do is shift where they apply their power. And having power over others, such that you're dominating, you're bossy, is different than on the positive application of power, which is to be the boss. Bossy and the boss. One is leadership, the other one is domination. But I don't want to disempower kids, and I think that's what ends up happening, is that we see these very powerful kids, and if they're using it in the wrong way, then parents think hey, that's too much for one kid. And so it's I call it whack-a-mole parenting. They try to like squash the power out of them, but all it does is it just pops up again later. Right. So that's not the right way to go about correcting it. It's directional, not disempowering.
So how do we shift that? Because I think for a lot of parents, they were either raised in a situation, in an autocratic,
more autocratic,
right?
Yeah, which is like ruling with the heavy fist. A lot of control, not much friendliness.
Right, and so as the next generation comes up, they maybe don't want to rule in that way, but ultimately they still believe, because I'm the boss. I am the boss of you, therefore my rules, my house, my rules, this is what we do. So how do you shift that with parents to allow for a little bit more of that building a relationship and dropping the power struggle?
This is all going to come down to skills set, because to your point, I don't necessarily think that parents are consciously walking around saying, I choose to be an autocratic, dictatorial parent. I think that's the better way to go. Like, I don't think that's, I think what ends up happening is they're like, I'm trying to be a good parent, and good parents get their kids to school on time, and I respect punctuality, and that looks like respect, and I can't get my kid to move along. And now I'm furious because now I'm looking like I'm not functioning as a parent, and what am I going to do? And when I say, please help, be cooperative, put your coat on, and they say no, I've got nothing, I've got no tools. So that's where the frustration comes in. And so what we end up doing is when we're in those panicked moments of what else am I supposed to do, and we're feeling defeated as a parent, we resort to more of what we would have known from our childhood. And so we're much more likely to yell and scream and do all those things. And then feel bad about it because it isn't our way that we want to parent, but we really were stymied for other solutions.
Right. Or on the opposite side, you just stand there and burst into tears
well,
as a parent, right?
To your
Not
point.
that I've done that. A friend
somebody wrote in and told us about that.
Of a friend of mine maybe talked about having a breakdown and just crying at the front door.
I heard it happen once in some home somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
But to your point, though, we either came from a parenting background that was very autocratic. And in fact, I would say that's been more the North American tradition. You do as I say. Children are seen, not heard. That was much more our history here in this culture and in European cultures. But the alternative to that is another style of parenting, which is the permissive jellyfish style of parenting, where really now we've got a lot of friendliness, but we have no firmness. So really, in looking at the equation that I was talking about before about one up, one down relationships, in the autocratic, the parent is usually the tyrant. The child is the slave to their tyranny. In the permissive jellyfish style, it's the opposite. The child is ruling the house, and they are the tyrant, and the parent is the doormat, and the child is walking all over them and ruling the roost, and it's quite a chaotic feeling. And so, interestingly, both of these types of parenting styles have negative outcomes for kids. That what I'm trying to accomplish, and Adlerian parenting gives us the tools and the framework, is to get off this teeter-totter and instead live in mutually respectful relationships, egalitarian relationships. But what we hear now, and here's where so much of the confusion is that when we see the permissive, when you see the child being the tyrant in a household, running around a restaurant, misbehaving, won't be quiet in the movie theater, is acting out on the bus in public and stuff. A lot of people in the public will say, see, look what's happened to kids today. Parents are afraid to get their kids in line. It was much better when I was a kid. My parents used the wooden spoon and used all these punitive tactics. We should go back to our old ways. But those only work so long. That's just the same system, just with somebody else in charge.
Yes.
And a lot of what happens, like now in our households, it's the flipping. Sometimes I win the power struggle, sometimes you win the power struggle. Sometimes I win the power struggle, sometimes you win. I'm saying let's get out of that style of relating altogether and live in mutually respectful relationships where power is shared appropriately, not equally.
So how do you do that? And I like that.
We got, Jen.
We got to extend
No,
this.
I have very, very pragmatic tips to work on that.
But I like what you just said, because it's sharing
power appropriately. Right. So the model that and I've written about it extensively in Honey, I Wrecked the Kids. The first step is to recognize that the situation that you're encountering is a power struggle, and that is to differentiate it from attention-seeking behavior. So the cardinal things you want to look for to know that you're in a power struggle, and again, you're going to see it as defiance and all those things, but just watch the dynamic. Are you angry? If you as the parent are angry, that is the first sign that you're in a power struggle. Second sign, does it amplify and get worse? Meaning ratchets up. So if I say, get ready for school, no, I won't, I'm going to make you, I just peed my pants, whatever. If you feel this one-upmanship, the intensification, that tells me that's the bid for power, for who's on top, okay? So it intensifies. That's the second piece. The third piece is listen to your self-talk. If your mind is saying something like, you're not getting away with this, if your mind is saying something like, how do I make him? How do I make him get in the car? How do I make him do his homework? How do I make him brush his teeth? That make him tells me that this is a power issue.
Okay.
Because in fact, that's really what the child is reacting to. It's not so much about the actual homework and getting in the car. And that's not what they have problems with. What they have problems with is being micromanaged, being controlled, being told what to do in any of a million different ways that parents tell kids what to do.
Okay.
So this number might blow your mind, but I read research that said something like 200 compliance requests are given to a child every day.
Really?
Hang up your coat, put away your bag, sit over here, eat your broccoli, one more bite, don't touch your sister. 200 a day.
200.
Would you like to be told what to do 200 times a day?
No.
No. And at some point, you would either get mother or father deaf, which is going to look like my kid doesn't listen.
I'm at about
Right?
5.
Is that,
Currently.
yeah, currently, yeah. Yeah, and my max, 6, so watch it.
That's right.
So we tell kids what to do all the time. And again, we're not conscious of it because we just think of it as parenting. But we give far too much instructions to our kids. And we don't spend enough time developing the skills and the mastery that they need in order to have some autonomy and be self-directed, which is basic to every human being. We want to cooperate and live amongst other people, but we want to develop our own being too, and have our own mind, our own voice, our own say. And a lot of parents don't know what that looks like in the family. How do we appropriately empower our children? So the first thing I would say is get into all the skills training that you can. Mostly we infantilize our kids. Most kids could be making their own breakfast, loading the dishwasher, looking after their laundry, managing an allowance, simple things like that, far earlier than we're willing to train and hand over responsibility. The more things that you can do like that, the better. And then also having a say, having a voice in the family. So that if your kids are expected, for example, if they're refusing to eat what you made for dinner, well, have you asked them to have a say around family meals?
Right.
Now, I'm not saying have a say means, this is where I say too much power. I'm saying appropriate power. Too much say is saying, I don't want to eat this, go make me something else. That's disrespectful to you. You are not a short order cook. Right? So that's too much power. But to say, you're a member of this family and you have tastes and preferences, as do I. I need to respect the budget and my time. How can we get together with everybody's different palates and choices and limitations on time and money and come up with something that this family could eat? And put it out as a problem that needs a solution where everyone gets together and has some input. And families, kids are very creative. I've got some families where one child picks a meal per week. So it's like, it's Mondays, I pick, today it's spaghetti. Tomorrow it's Jen's day, she picks hamburgers. And each kid has a day. I have other ones where the parents just say at the beginning of the week, give me your request for something special this week and I'll work it into the schedule.
Yes.
Some parents will say, it's half an hour till lunch, you have a choice. Do you want grilled cheese or macaroni? Now's the time to decide. Because now's the time I'm cooking, not after it's already prepared. So there's different ways to do it. You have to be creative, but asking kids to have that input appropriately means that when you actually serve the spaghetti or the macaroni, you're not going to get the pushback, less likely to get the pushback.
And those are two options that you already agree with.
Right.
You're not giving something that's completely out of the question.
Yeah.
But the option now is they feel empowered to make a decision.
Right.
Yes.
So another example around this would be bathing. So some parents would say, well, that's not a choice. Like, kids are dirty, I have to give them a bath. And I would say, well, let's step back and let's look at in my little thing, determine it's a power struggle. 2, look at what are the roles, responsibilities, and needs of the situation. So parents say kids need to have baths. That is like this thing. Kids, well, yes, kids need to have a modicum of hygiene so that they don't break out in diaper rash and smell so bad people don't want to be around them. But you could actually say, the reason why we bathe is for health reasons and whatever. But it doesn't have to be every night. Like, honestly, I had a kid with eczema. My doctor's like, bathe her less. We way overbathe kids in this country. So it's like, we need to bathe twice a week. What days of the week would you like to put bathing on the schedule? So I'm not giving you the choice bathe or not bathe, but I am saying we at least need to meet the minimum criteria for hygiene. What 2 days would you like to pick? So it's just opening that up And when can we bathe? We could bathe after school. It doesn't have to be at bedtime. We could bathe in the morning. There's lots of different ways to skin that cat. So just asking kids for some input around that, giving them some wiggle room, makes them feel less pushed around.
Right. Okay, we have a couple of questions.
Yeah, thank you, viewers. Can I say again, we've got a very great group of viewers who are very active and engaged and send me very lovely notes about how helpful all this is. So keep sending in your questions.
This is a question from a stepmom. I'm not going to say what her name is, but she's been a stepmom for almost 6 years now to a child who is lazy, defiant, and rude. Hence, maybe why I didn't use the name
right.
to begin with.
Yeah.
Not only am I up against him, it seems I'm up against my own spouse and his ex-wife as they complain that we all have the same issues, but no one gives the child any consequences or rules. I find it difficult as I have a daughter 1 year younger who has rules and punishments, yet I seem to have to parent differently for the two of them, and it's very frustrating. His mother makes him accountable for nothing, and I'm parenting him in our home, which seems to cause arguments in our home between his father and I, as his father is ADHD and doesn't see or observe or pay attention to his child's actions. The child is sneaky, lies constantly for the past 3 years, and has no respect for anyone. How do I find sanity?
Yeah.
So a very different dynamic than what we've been talking about, and now you've added in blended family, different struggles among the household as well.
So I always go back to we have to understand the child in the context of their social environment. And you can see this is a complicated one, right? So we got a stepsister, we got step parents, we've got parents who disagree, different parenting styles. Like there's a lot going on. And so I don't want to be disrespectful by giving a short, quick answer. I mean, I'm going to do something, but I just to honor the fact that there's a lot going on in this kid's life.
Right.
But when we look at the description of lazy, defiant, rude. So this is a child who's choosing not to be cooperative with people in his family. So respect has left the relationships that he is in, because we tend not to be rude and defiant to people who there's goodwill in that we like. So we definitely need to improve the relationship. And what likely is in terms of what's getting in the way for this child, I'm not particularly sure. We talked earlier on the sibling show that one of the number one sources of discouragement is the sense that a sibling is preferred. And when you bring kids together from different families and they suddenly have siblings that they didn't have before, and if one's performing better, that can be super discouraging. I usually see laziness as being a sign of discouragement. Parents think it's lack of motivation, but really it's a sign of kind of checking out and feeling like I don't feel that if I tried I would succeed, so I'm not going to try at all. It can also be in the adolescent years flooding, where it is a way of like avoidance, but out of self-care. Like I'm flooded. I can't take anymore. I'm shutting down for those reasons. So I would say this is a discouraged kid, and the relationships in the family have suffered. So I would recommend counseling, but the number one thing is to build up that relationship, to show caring, love, concern. Because right now that he's being oppositional, and I want to get them to be in alliance.
So this could be the same situation in a family who has two homes. If a child has two homes, because now the rules in each home are different.
And they should be, and that's fine if they are.
Right. But it's difficult for a child, and maybe that power struggle comes as they return to one home and haven't had the same kind of structure as they did in the other one.
Yeah, there is an adjustment period. Like I do know, for example, when I worked in the nursery school, that we'd have these little kids in our class that were the line leader and handing out snack and cleaning up toys or whatever, and then their parents would pick them up at the door, and the parent would pick them up and stick a pacifier in their mouth and hold them on the hip like they were an infant. And I would think it would be really hard to go home and be treated like a baby after you've just spent a day really
being a leader.
You know what I mean? So you might get more misbehavior at home. And same thing, you might have mom's home versus dad's home, or two different environments, and it might be doubly discouraging, where it's like, people don't trust or have faith in me in this environment compared to the other. But I would say kids know the difference between their relationship with their mom, their dad, their step-parent, their teacher, their grandparent. Each of those relationships is unique and individual. And so I might not be able to influence what my ex-husband is doing with the kids, but I can own the part of the relationship that I want to work on. And so she can, without changing all the other people's relationships, she can just work on her relationship with that discouraged son. And I would start by listening. It sounds to me like he's hurting on some level, and to be able to step inside and try to experience his reality, listen to what he has to say, so that she can try to understand it through his ears, through his eyes, through his heart. What would it be like to be this kid in this family? Rather than just defensiveness, you know, because that's usually, you know, they'll say like, well, you always give everything to my sister. And our natural response would be, no, I don't. Just last week, I took you to the Blue Jays game or something, as opposed to saying, so you're telling me that you feel that that someone is preferred and you're getting the short end of the stick. Well, that would be a terrible feeling. I want to validate what their experience is. I can say, oh, you know, that's not the reality I'm trying to create, and let's do better on that. But until we can figure out what that pain point is, and it starts with listening. And if she can't get a listening conversation and start building up the relationship herself, go to counseling. A lot of kids will open up better to they could, if the relationship's gone soured, sometimes they'll say they never listen, why bother talking? And they might talk to a third party instead.
Sandra writes, how do you deal with a 4-year-old that hits every time you say no? I've tried timeouts. I tried explaining that it hurts, but he just hits harder or laughs. He is normally a good boy, but when he is tired and wants to do something dangerous or that is not allowed, he gets defiant and shows his displeasure by hitting, especially mom.
Well, I've got 2 ideas. You can decide how you feel about it. So he clearly knows that he knows the moral code that hitting is not okay, because he grins when he does it. So he knows he's breaking the rule. And in fact, part of what's feeling so good about it is that I've stymied you. You don't know how to make me stop doing this. So she has tried a few things. Either she can...
Or there's no one-up to that. That's kind of the top, right?
Yeah,
him hitting is the ultimate, we've reached, you're not...
Like if you're throwing that baseball bat and you're deciding who's going to go, he's got this one. He's got the top card. He's got the hammer with that one, for sure. So part of the things that she can do, she could pick any one of those things and just do it more consistently. I think parents forget that because we don't have confidence in what we're doing, one day we try this and one day we try that and one day we try this. If you actually would have picked any one and done it longer, you might have had success. If he always went to his room, you know, for a timeout, as opposed to just occasionally. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's that. So another thing you could do to try to de-emphasize, first of all, don't get all ruffled up. I don't want him to get the win. I don't want him to get the benefit of having upset me. So even though you might feel hurt by it and you might feel, you know, how can I make him stop hitting me? You can see it right there. You know, try not to show your dysregulation around that happening. Just kind of keep that on the low down. And then the other thing that I would do is I might say to him, she hasn't tried this one yet, it's basically tying freedoms and consequences, freedoms and responsibilities together. So it's like, if you'd like to have free use of your hands, you need to show me that you can use them responsibly. If you're having trouble using your hands responsibly, then I'll need to control them for you. And because he's little, I wouldn't do this to a 10-year-old, but I would just grab it when he hits her, I would just grab his hands, and the immediate reaction of the child is to reflexively want to pull out and get freedom from being held. Right? So just grab the, no, pull back. Say, oh, it looks like you'd like to use your hands. You'd like to have the freedom of having your own hands. You don't want mommy to hold them. So please show me you can use them responsibly. So again, if he whacks, you know, just that little, use them responsibly. So I've had little hitters and biters in my classroom where I didn't hold them like this all day. But I never believe in expelling children. I think that's terrible. I want to help them socialize. I want them to get over what problems they're having. It doesn't help if you send them away. But I have had kids where, because they bite and hit so many of the other kids in the classroom, where they're just my friend for the day, and I hold their hand and we just have to buddy up, and I shadow them because I need to keep the other kids safe. And so for the first day it might just be 5 minutes, but then it's like, okay, you know, if you can use your hands and your mouth safely, then you're happy to be with other people. So you could limit the freedoms a little bit there.
So this goes back to the whole take time for training, because I know you've mentioned a couple things throughout the show. One is, you know, shadowing for the day. And the other is, I just lost it. When you shadow for the day, and then also when you are standing at the door and you're late for something and you're yelling at them, how do I make them get in the car because we have to be to an appointment that we cannot miss?
Right.
So those situations in the moment, parents are overwhelmed because they go, I don't have time to spend a whole day to hold their hand.
Right. You know.
However,
you do have 2 or 3 days until this thing is over.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were to do it, and if you were to take time for that training and really stick to it, or not have the major appointment, just pretend you have an appointment.
Yeah. Set it up.
Right.
Yeah. Set up situations where you have the time and the patience to let the consequences and the experience follow through to the end, where you're not freaking out because you needed to get out the door, be punctual for sure.
Right.
And I think one of the, going back to that freedoms and responsibilities, remember, a child who's looking for power wants freedom, autonomy. They want to be self-directed. They want to be able to make choices for themselves. And what I'm trying to let them do is say, yes, you decide for you, but it also means that when you make choices, you live with the outcomes of those choices. But I'm not going to try to control you. I can control the situation, but I can't control you. So I'll give an example around that. I will fight to get a kid to wash their hands for dinner. And that fight could go on for a really long time, and I can't make them wash their hands. They'll defy me in that. They won't listen, they'll refuse, they'll be defiant. But instead, if I say, you do you, you make choices for yourself. I don't know what you're going to decide to do, but I can control the situation, which is, in our house, it's a requirement of coming to the dinner table that your hands are washed. I don't know what you'll do with that information. You'll wash your hands or you won't, but I'm going to make sure that people that come to the table have their hands washed.
Right.
So if they don't wash their hands, no biggie. They missed the meal. They wash their hands, great, glad you're here, pull up a chair.
Yeah.
But I'm not making them do anything. They're deciding. And when it no longer has the benefit of the one-upmanship of superiority control piece, and it's just like, well, now it's just me and my choices. There's no psychodynamic between the two of you. I actually am hungry. I want to eat. But if you get locked into a power struggle, the child is going to perceive, my mother wants me to wash my hands. If I wash my hands and come to the table, then she will be in control of me. Washing my hands is the losing proposition, and I am just her puppet.
Right.
And I will not give her that satisfaction. And so it's even things they want to do, they don't do just to defy you.
Can you believe we're at a half hour?
I can't believe it, but we have more shows, more time at other times with people.
More shows, more opportunities. Check out the Rogers TV YouTube channel for all of the shows, all of the topics. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Parenting Show.